Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. How are we getting on? Welcome to a brand new camp build, and we are down in the Vault Utility Room, the first of the shelters today, building a kind of underground street alleyway scene that is inspired in part by Cyberpunk 2077 that we'll be jumping into later in the week, and also by a build I saw over on Twitter from ZeroFoxFK. So let's jump in and take a little look at this place, shall we? Okay then, Vault Utility Room. This is the first of the shelters. It's the free one. No particular need to show the map on this one, seeing as literally anywhere will do. So, we'll start off with the floor. As I just said, this was inspired partly by Cyberpunk 2077. I had a look through a number of screenshots, trailers, things like that, street scenes in there. Obviously, Fallout being Fallout, it doesn't look that much like Cyberpunk, so it is what it is, but hopefully we'll get a little bit of that vibe going on towards the end. I also saw a wonderful little build over on Twitter from ZeroFoxFK, who, if you don't follow him, I'll chuck a link to his Twitter account down in the description below, and you should absolutely go over there and give him a follow. And follow me while you're at it, because he's an absolutely wonderful photographer in Fallout, takes some amazing pictures around Appalachia, and did a very, very cool little street scene down in this space, which I thought would be fun to have my own crack at. So do head on over there and check him out. But this build... So, as I'm sure some of you guys know already, the most maddening thing about building down here is trying to get a floor in that actually fits between the walls, or one of the most maddening things. This whole flooring section initially started out at well over half an hour just to get the floor down, so hardcore editing was required to get this to a sensible length. But phase one here is to position these two floors into the corners and get them manually placed in exactly where we need them. As that is the starting point, it's the hardest thing to do. You can see we're having a few issues getting everything to line up, snap together, or go in manually. It's a mixture of both. So, in looking at this, I know a few people will be a little frustrated that I've not shown you exactly how I did it. I have to say, believe me, you don't want me to show you that. It took a ridiculously long amount of time, and I was about ready to throw my computer out the window by the end of it. So, I really suggest you just taking the general idea and being willing to be flexible and adaptable and deal with what comes up in your own attempts to build down here, rather than trying to directly follow anything you see online. That goes for anybody else's build, I suspect, as well. As, it was maddeningly frustrating. What should I try and say that word? So, things like this on the wall that we can see there, that little junction box or whatever it is, push the collision of the walls out a little bit where they are, which means you can't get the floor in as far as you need to, which is infuriating. So once again, we have to manually place the outer floors as far over as we possibly can, and then work with a combination of snapping and sort of manual placement to kind of try and line things up. Fortunately, when we're done, the fact that a lot of this stuff just doesn't line up won't matter. It will be well concealed. You'll see towards the end, but in general, just getting the floors in is the thing to do. So I would suggest if you're not particular about the floor or texture you're using, pick one that doesn't have edges like the metal floors we're using here. Pick something that will sort of blend together irrespective of how you line it up. However, for a moment there, everything went really, really well, and everything just snapped nice and smooth. But sadly, the good times couldn't last forever, and we're back to fighting with it again. So, most of that middle section was okay to snap everything together in, but we get back to the edge here and it gets stroppy again. Presumably something to do with these cables on the wall, I'm not sure, but it does make it easier for you to see sort of where I am along the side of the room. Once again, we're back to the old position manually and then try and snap from there approach. So what we're going to do is put this one as close to where I want it as possible, which I can't quite get it where I want it to. It was refusing to play ball on that. So get it as close as possible, tweak it and make sure it's lined up so it's not cockeyed, which it is a little bit there, so a small amount of adjustment required. And then we'll use that as a guideline to eyeball the next floor piece, which actually did go where I wanted it to. We'll see in just a moment. So that's sort of where I want it, but not quite. So grab the next one, get that out of the way. And we'll eyeball this one into place. So it's more or less on the right line. Now we just need to push it forward. Kind of straighten it up a little bit. Of course, the inability to make micro adjustments to these is also not very helpful, but it is what it is. We'll make the best we can with it. So nearly there with that, we just shunt it a little bit further over. Sometimes they go in a bit further than you might think, so try giving it a shove a bit closer to the wall if it's not playing ball. But here, we can now just tweak this, and oh look at that, it's just snapped to the one we've just put in, and now it's pretty much lined up, close enough that you won't notice when we're done anyway. which unfortunately is something we have to settle on for this. This one was weirdly convenient. Put this down, snapped it into place, picked it up again, shunt it forward, and in it goes. Sometimes putting things down and then picking them back up again is just the best way to do it. Same thing with a number of things during the decoration phase as well. If you're trying to float them in midair or anything like that, just stick them anywhere, then move them afterwards. They seem to cooperate a bit more. Once again, we have another of these junction boxes or whatever, and that box in the corner that is... God knows what it's doing there, but it's causing problems, so... improvisation is required again. So we'll shove this one over as far as we can. This ends up being a really wonky corner, but you just won't notice it in the final build. You'll see I went crazy with the decoration, which is one of the awesome things about building down here, I do have to admit. I used about 2/3 of the build budget, and you'll see how packed the place is in a moment. But, this is wanting to snap in multiple places, so we'll just pick the best we can, put those together. There we go, that corner is not going to work by any stretch of the imagination, but weirdly, this does. I just snap it straight through the existing floor. Some of the rules have been relaxed, some of them haven't. Some of the wrong rules haven't been relaxed, some of the wrong ones have been relaxed. It's all a bit weird down here. But there's nothing else that's going to snap together to look any better than that. Let's move on to the next bit. I do like the wet kind of look of the floor down here. It keeps that kind of street vibe going on, alleyway vibe. Really cool. The light works well with the metal flooring. Pity the edges don't match up quite so evenly. If they didn't have that blue bar around the edge, and the texture went all the way to the edge, then it really wouldn't matter. There'd be no lines once it was finished, so that'd be great. But what can we do? So, that wall has been manually positioned over the join between two floor pieces, because I want it a floor and a half away from the far end where the door is. So, it's going to be kind of central structure that we can move around. So we'll get the roof tucked in there. Unfortunately, having both pieces on prevented me from snapping this in, so we took one off, and we can now snap that back in on the edge. So the idea was to have white walls exposed and double these up. Unfortunately, because of where I'm putting them, I can't use the doorway trick, but the thought was that it would look a bit more street-like, a bit more in keeping with the Cyberpunk vibe. In hindsight, it may also have been better to go the other way, because the red brick looks absolutely fantastic down here. I really like the effect of the lighting on it. But, piece by piece, we will manually edge this together. We can get them pretty darn close once you turn the snapping off. Probably a bit late for pointing this out, but yeah, always worth keeping an eye on whether or not the snapping's toggled on or off down at the bottom. It's a case of very much mixing and matching with that. We'll repeat the process over here. Unfortunately, the roofs that I did have on this side were preventing the walls from going in, so I had to take them off first. It's caused all manner of issues. Well, there we go. Carefully edge those together so that you can't really see the join. Looking good. And that'll form the central section that we're going to have a small section of roof over the top of. And this is where we run into yet more issues. That one went in fine. For some reason, this piece would not cooperate. So my initial plan was to just try and put this in using sort of manual placement without the snapping on. Which kind of works, but it tends not to sit very evenly, and it just doesn't look that smooth. They're lining things up so that they look flush is occasionally cooperative, often really not, which is frustrating given that it's supposed to be easier. But I took that one off the side, accidentally turned the snapping back on, and suddenly it worked, which it wasn't doing before, so God knows why, but there we go. Now, no wait, here it comes. It'll just snap straight onto the edge in a second. There we go. And for some reason, apparently that works. Hell knows. But we've got a roof on, so I'm going to take it. So I'm going to add some extra walls around the outside of this, and furniture and things like that to enclose this space under the roofs. But we'll start off by putting a couple of posts in, so the thing looks supported. At this point, I hadn't decided exactly what I was going to do with the walls. That came more or less in the decoration phase, which was very, very extensive. So we'll do a bit of a different walkthrough of the tour this time, just because showing you all the detailed decoration would have been very, very time consuming, and we'd have been here for about 3 hours, so we'll do a slightly more detailed and extensive tour instead. But, good thing about turning and snapping off, those will go straight in wherever we want them, which is definitely a blessing after spending ages of trying to basically glitch them onto the corners in the main game. There we go, it's in place. Looking good. So over this side, I wanted to create similar sort of structure in the corners, But unfortunately, the roofs just won't go in close to the back wall, so they'll be the one on the right here. But so we basically have to make do without having a roof on there, which kind of works in the end. But we'll stick a wall in here now, and that will divide it off into kind of streets a bit more effectively when the servers catch up. And I'll put an extra kiosk on this end wall and make a couple of little adjustments during the decoration phase, but we'll talk about those when we get to them. So for this end nearer the front edge, I'm having a little look around to make sure that we're going to be able to get through the gaps between the structures here. I want them close together, but not so close as I can't move around. But as that's going to work, we're going to use this wall to get a roof in at the right height. Eventually. There we go. So there's the roof. And we'll pull the wall out, put it over the other side, and repeat over here and support with a couple of posts. I actually ended up putting some walls around this one on the left as you come in. Just because I ended up changing my plan a little bit as we went along during the decoration phase, but for now we'll put some posts in. Just need one on each corner to make it look supported, as the wall's doing the job at the other edges. But yeah, all in all, it's come into a nice little shopping street alleyway kind of look. And we're going to, as I say, take a different approach with the tour. I'm going to go slowly through it and do kind of a live talk through so I can talk about things in a bit more detail, as there's a heck of a lot to discuss on that. So, with the basic idea in place, let's do some crazy decorating. Okay then, so as promised, slow walk around first, and then we'll talk about it in a bit more detail. So, here we go. Really happy with how this has come out with the final decoration. Quite the transformation, even if I do say so myself. The idea here was just to go nuts with as much detail as possible and get as much sort of neon and lights and stuff like that as possible to kind of get the Cyberpunk vibe. As I said, there's a few bits and pieces in the trailers that have street level shots. That's the sort of thing I kept in mind while I was sort of building this place and decorating it. I had it in the back of my mind. Also, obviously, as I said earlier, Zero Fox FK's little street scene down here as well was very, very cool. Well worth checking out over on Twitter. Make sure you go and do that. But, here we go, a little bar area. What was the entrance here? A few signs to direct you towards other businesses further around, which I like as well. Made good use of the signs. Head on round. Bit of a street vibe going on. Nice and cramped. Lots and lots of trash and bins and detritus everywhere. Big Steve's gun shop here. Unfortunately, no guns on display in his armor cage, blocker cage thing. But what can we do? Still have our limitations. A few little bits and pieces around here. Little armor shop. Again, no armor stands, so what can we do? Kind of junk and general store type vibe I was going for with the Tinker's Bench and the power armor station there. See, I've just walled off that back corner so you can't see it. And we have the Ripper Dock down here, such as it is. That was the idea I was going for. We'll go through it in a bit more detail on the next pass. There we go, nice little street. I really like the side of the street actually, and all the stuff on the walls. It came together quite nicely. Nice little open air dining space. Got a little Power Noodles vibe, but also kind of not at the same time. Quite pleased with that. I'd like more bottles and stuff, things like that to put on there. Maybe some fire to go on the grills there, but what can we do? Quite pleased I managed to tuck them all into the space though. Came out well. And our little chem shack. You can see I've walled it off. So we've got a little space for our chem pusher to lift back there and sort of serves over the top of their chemistry bench on the inside. And there we go. So that's a quick look around. The basic idea here was to manually position walls in. I turned the snapping off and just pushed them as close together as I could get. We've got as many signs and bits of detail as possible on there, much sort of to look at and keep the place feeling as busy as possible. I was running out of interesting things to add. I'd been through all of the menus and stuff was starting to not make any sense, so there's a lot of stuff in here. A few fashion act decorations just to bring it to life a little bit more. Lots and lots of neon, lots of lights, that's the general goal. Nice secure look for our chem pusher here, who snuggles with the sheep's got plushie of an evening. And apparently the Nuka girl as well. He's a fan. Or she, no judging. There we go. Tiny little space for them to live in. We'll go around the other way. So couple of little bits of detail in here. One thing I did like was the idea of putting the flashlight confetti down on the floor, just to make it look like there's a bit of litter and trash around. Stuff uses an astounding amount of silver, but it did the job as well as could be expected for Fallout. As we come on inside, little look, just enough room to get down here. These are half walls at the top though, just floated in place up against the roof. So you turn the snapping off, you basically place them in midair, and it creates a nice kind of sign and sort of frontage for the place, which works quite nicely. You know, it's very, very carefully squeeze all of this together. Most of the time, sort of on the left of this cooking station, it was easier to push the stash box, I suppose, there towards the cooking station. But on the right, where the milk machine is, it was easier to push the cooking station towards the milk machine. It's an odd set of circumstances, but the object you move can change whether or not you can sit things close together sometimes. A few little bits of detail in and around here, such as we could manage. Squeezed in one of the new open neon signs, which look pretty cool. I like those a lot. Use a few too many. A few extra signs tucked around. And there we go. Our little open air food area. Come on, door closed. Go. Sign inviting you around. I used a lot of the quantum signs a few times, things like that, just because the neon on the lights were necessary. These little boxes on the wall are the new power generators that put out 12 power that Bethesda added for shelters. They just clip straight onto the wall and look relatively innocuous. They're really cool. Still have to wire them up, which is a bit unfortunate. They don't act like conduits. Wish they did, but they'll do as they are. So we've got a few wires tucked around, but they kind of disappear when you're not looking at them. So that's cool. Plenty of details on the wall. Good use for Dr. Ken's Chemden sign, finally. Kind of clips through quite nicely there as well. It's quite cool. I would like to have a version of this that doesn't have the post down the middle. Would have worked better for a service hatch, but this is quite cool. All the signs out front. Little splash of light moving around. Random toilet thrown in, because you've got to, along with the Nuka-Cola machine. I'll squeeze through into the back area. So, animatronic clown. Mostly because weirdness and why not. I like the look of the cage sort of wall here that's kind of peering through the jail wall through. It's behind stuff and kind of covered up, but at the same time it's present. It kind of blends in quite nicely. I like the way that came out. A couple of bookcases just floating up the top there just to close that end off as well. So here is our little Ripper dock. So loads of medical stuff around, keeping with the Fallout and somewhat Cyberpunk sense of humour and having completely inappropriate cigarette machines next to a doctor's office. We'll head on through. Unfortunately, when you walk, sometimes it's a bit of a nightmare to get through small gaps. Come on, there we go. There we go. The new wheelchair added with steel door. Drop that in there. Thought the bath would be a good option to kind of give a nod to one of the early missions I know we're going to be doing in Cyberpunk, and also catch any runoff from the operating table there. A little more power in there, stop the conduits wandering too far around. Bed, somewhere to sit down and get your cyberware installed. I like the little Vault-Tec rubber mats, but I wish we had more of them and they were larger and plainer as well. But it's a good addition nonetheless. Doctor's seat there. Sadly no medical equipment to put down, but we do what we can. Chem station. More inappropriate lighting and signage. And symptomatic, because you've got to. There we go. So the armor place is one of the biggest changes that I made during the decoration phase, other than obviously the decoration. But basically we floated this roof in the space between these two spots on either side. You see the walls that we put in before there. And then these walls on the side of the armor shack are just wooden half walls and placed in manually with the triangular pieces snapped onto the top. And a couple of posts for extra support, just to kind of give it a different look and a bit more of a shack kind of a vibe. So, relatively easy to do. Got a little bit of room to manoeuvre here. Little armor ace thing on the wall. That thing is ridiculously huge, but I do kind of like it for that, much as it's awkward. Got a few bits and pieces on the shelves, which is cool. They're still a bit temperamental. You can see that stash box jumped up from the shelf below and slightly clips through, but what can we do? Little armor sign, a few bits and pieces of detail, but still plenty of room to get in here and operate anything you need to. Quite happy with how it came out. There we go, here's our little junk shop, tinker's shop kind of vibe. plenty of signs. I was struggling for what to do for a counter on here, so I used the tables and eventually figured I could drop this neon sign on the front to kind of close it off a little bit. Looks pretty cool. Squeeze the newsstand in there as well, just to break up the lines a little bit. I did have 3 here originally. It looks better with the newsstand, just to get some transitions in height. Sign on there, see if we can squeeze through here. We can. So we've got a little power armor station. Just kind of all this is unnecessary because I've got a camp upstairs, but I do like it nonetheless. All the little accoutrements we need there. Posters on these walls are placed manually, which is an advantage because if you try and snap them on, they get with being on the outside, they'll clip through the textures. So being able to place them manually down here is quite a nice little thing. Well, a few more shelves, just to close this spot off because it's just an abandoned heap of junk back there, so not much we can do. But it does the job. Nixie tube light that I picked up the other day. A few bits and pieces dropped from the shelves. Some jumped up, some did not. Gotta have our little kitty up the top there. There you go, there's a little nod to Fox in the form of a weather vane there. A few little bits and pieces on the shelf. This particularly large shelf is oddly probably the most cooperative one of the lot. Dropping stuff onto those shelves down here at least was much easier, as all the others were just way more awkward. A few more bits and pieces on the wall, and our Tinker's bench. And we'll head on round. Just say, by the way, if you're going to put stuff like this confetti on the floor and try and dirty it up a little bit, make sure you remember to do it first, because coming back to change it afterwards was annoying when I had to do that. There we go. Head on around a little bit. A few more bins, a few more bits of trash. This car stash box is a tad large, but it does look quite cool down here. I do like it. Our bathroom facilities. Not quite sure what the danger of death sign is referring to, but let's hope we don't find out, given its location. Here we go, we'll move on round to our gun shop. This is probably going to be a bit awkward to get in as well, because it's a tight squeeze here. Again, just squeeze as much little bits of detail around as I could. Some lighting on there. I liked using the kind of spindly weapons workbench here. I was able to get the sign on the front of it, again, just floating it in. It just kind of blends in with the rest of the environment, doesn't stick out so much as the blue one would have done, so quite like how that came out. Yeah, I knew it was going to be awkward. Yeah, well. Ramming speed. There we go, we're in. Little fan on the top there. A few bits and pieces on the floor. Flags. I like the fact that it kind of feels closed off by the stuff that presents as the entranceway as well. Kind of interacts in quite a nice little way there, behind the prison bars, as it were. Looks quite cool, quite pleased with that. And here's our little gun cage. As I say, sadly, can't put any guns in here. We don't have display cases either, which is maddening right now, because they would have been really, really handy for shops and stuff. What can we do? We've got some ammo crates, we've got some lockers, we've got some shelves. You're just going to have to kind of squint and pretend you see guns on there. Sad, but it is what it is. Hopefully Bethesda will change that in time. I don't see why they couldn't, especially as they haven't told us why. Fingers crossed for the future. See if we can get back out again. Hey, that went better. We'll move on to our little bar area. Fortunately, no bottles to be placed, and this sign prevents us from getting in, but... See, nice little brewing station. Bills, place to hang out, have a few beers, chill out in the... Not entirely alfresco, but kind of alfresco. Little bar here. Loads of little detail around. Crammed in what I could, but the walls here have got lots of stuff sticking out, so can't quite put as much on as I'd like. Went for plushies because I couldn't put anything else on the shelf. And there we go. Constantly adding bits more decoration. I decided not to do the front area, partly because I like the surprise when you come through this door and the contrast. Not people to come, if they can pick their way in, which somebody actually did, come up to that door and find themselves presented with what they think is going to be not particularly interesting, and then open up and boom, in your face. But yeah, really like how this came out, like the colours, like the lighting down here, like look at the floors in particular. It's just like a really nice trashy street scene. Feels like, in my opinion, it coming out of a kind of lower economic status area of Cyberpunk. Well, that was what I was going for. Obviously, very, very Fallout, not Cyberpunk, but we do what we can. So, on that note, I do hope you folks found this interesting and enjoyed it. If you did, please do consider dropping subs and likes for me. It was very, very much appreciated. Do go over and follow Zero Fox on Twitter as well if you get the chance. While you're over there, make sure you're following me as well. You can also catch up with me on Facebook and Instagram if you'd like to as well. If you get the chance, do join us for some of the live streams as well. We're playing Fallout 76 as usual, finishing off Horizon Zero Dawn this week and starting Cyberpunk, as I say. And if you're really enjoying the content and you'd like to support the channel a little bit more, please consider becoming a channel member as well. Support is hugely appreciated, and if you're into such things, you can also check out the merch store down in the description as well. But for now, I will say thank you very much for watching. I do hope you enjoyed. I look forward to speaking to you all very, very soon.